Growing up, I never fit the mold my father built for our family. While others chased touchdowns, I found solace in kitchens, books, and music. My mother's love nurtured my dreams, even as my father's rejection fueled my resolve. This is the story of how I forged my own path. Growing up in our modest suburban home, I was often acutely aware of how different I was from the rest of my family. The house itself was a reflection of our lives, neat but unremarkable, nestled in a quiet neighborhood where everyone seemed to know each other's business. My father, Robert, was a towering figure both physically and emotionally. A former high school athlete who had never let go of his glory days, he was competitive to the core, rugged, and deeply invested in sports. To him, success was measured in touchdowns and trophies, a value system he passed down to my younger brother, Jason. Jason, 2 years my junior, took to my father's teachings like a fish to water. He was everything Robert wanted in a son: strong, confident, and fiercely athletic. He was the star quarterback of our school's football team by the time he was in middle school. His name often splashed across local papers alongside glowing accolades. Jason thrived in the spotlight, basking in our father's endless praise. "That's my boy," Robert would proclaim proudly at every game, his voice booming above the crowd. And then there was me, Nathan, the awkward elder son who struggled to fit into the mold my father had carved out. While Jason spent his afternoons at football practice or roughhousing with friends, I found solace in pursuits my father deemed unmanly. I loved reading novels that transported me to faraway places, singing along to whatever was playing on the radio, and most of all, cooking. My love for cooking began innocently enough. It started with afternoons in the kitchen with my mother Elizabeth, watching her chop vegetables or stir sauces with practiced ease. She was everything my father wasn't: warm, patient, and endlessly supportive. The kitchen was her domain, and she welcomed me into it with open arms. Together, we would bake cookies, experiment with new recipes, and even recreate dishes she remembered from her childhood. "This is my grandmother's apple pie recipe," she told me one day, handing me a faded handwritten card. She used to say that a good pie can bring people together no matter how far apart they are. Her words stuck with me, though I didn't fully understand their meaning at the time. What I did know was that the hours we spent together in the kitchen were some of the happiest of my life. It was our sanctuary, a place where I felt seen and valued. However, the more I bonded with my mother over cooking, the wider the chasm between my father and me grew. Robert couldn't hide his disdain for my interests. He would shake his head in disapproval whenever he found me in the kitchen, muttering comments like, "A man belongs on the field, not behind a stove." His words stung, but I learned to block them out, focusing instead on the encouragement my mother offered. She balanced the family dynamic with remarkable grace, always ensuring that Jason and I felt equally loved, even as my father's favoritism became more apparent. As Jason's achievements in sports mounted, so did my feelings of alienation. Family dinners often turned into celebrations of Jason's victories, with my father recounting his touchdowns in painstaking detail. My contributions, meals I had prepared with care and love, were acknowledged with little more than a passing remark. It was as if my efforts were invisible, overshadowed by the golden child sitting across the table. The divide between my father and me came to a head when I was 14. That was the year everything changed. My mother, the glue that held our family together, was diagnosed with late-stage ovarian cancer. The news hit like a tidal wave, leaving us all reeling. Her decline was swift, and within months she was confined to a hospital bed, her once vibrant spirit dimmed by the weight of her illness. Watching my mother fade away was the most painful experience of my life. I clung to the kitchen as my only connection to her, recreating her recipes in a desperate attempt to keep her memory alive. Each dish I made felt like a tribute to her, a way to hold onto the love and warmth she had given me. But while I turned to cooking as a source of comfort, my father and Jason withdrew into themselves. They masked their grief with stoicism, retreating into the world of sports and shutting me out in the process. After my mother passed away, our family fell apart. Without her presence to mediate, the simmering tensions between my father and me boiled over. Robert's criticisms became harsher, his disdain for my cooking now accompanied by demands that I man up and be more like Jason. One evening, after a particularly heated argument, he finally admitted what I had always suspected, that he didn't love me as much as he loved Jason. "I don't love you the same way," he said, his voice cold and unyielding. "Jason's everything I ever wanted in a son. You're just different." Those words cut me to my core. For years I had chased his approval, hoping that one day he might see value in who I was. But in that moment I realized the futility of my efforts. His love was conditional, reserved only for those who fit his narrow definition of success. The revelation was both devastating and liberating. I no longer had to waste energy trying to win a game that had been rigged from the start. From that day forward, I retreated further into myself. My relationship with my father became irreparably strained, the silence between us stretching longer with each passing day. Jason, though not openly hostile, didn't understand me either. He thrived in the spotlight while I faded into the background, finding solace in music, books, and the kitchen. The house that had once been filled with the sound of my mother's laughter now felt cold and empty. It was no longer a home but a place where I simply existed, biding my time until I could leave. Yet even in those dark days, the seeds of resilience were being planted within me. I didn't realize it at the time, but my father's rejection was shaping me in ways that would define my journey. His disapproval fueled a quiet determination to prove him wrong, to show the world and myself that I was more than the sum of his dismissive judgments. Looking back, I see those years of isolation as the foundation of my strength. They taught me to rely on myself, to find joy and purpose in the things that mattered to me, regardless of what others thought. I didn't yet know where my path would lead, but I knew one thing for certain: I wouldn't let my father's disdain define my story. After my mother passed away, the warmth and love that once filled our home disappeared, leaving a void that seemed impossible to fill. The house, once alive with the sound of her laughter and the smell of her cooking, now felt cold and lifeless. Grief hung in the air like a heavy fog, and I felt as though I were drowning in it. My father and Jason seemed to handle the loss in their own way, burying themselves in the familiar world of sports in stoic silence. But for me, the loss was unbearable. My mother had been my anchor, the one person who understood and supported me unconditionally. Without her, I felt completely adrift. The only place where I felt any semblance of comfort was the kitchen. It became my refuge, a space where her spirit still lingered. Every recipe I recreated brought her memory to life, as if she were standing beside me, guiding my hands. I would spend hours preparing her signature dishes: creamy pasta, hearty stews, and her famous apple pie. Cooking wasn't just therapeutic, it was a way of holding on to her, of preserving the bond we shared. In those moments, the kitchen wasn't just a room, it was a sanctuary, a place where I could feel close to her even though she was gone. My father, however, didn't see it that way. To him, my time spent in the kitchen was a waste. He would walk past me as I stood at the counter, chopping vegetables or kneading dough, and shake his head in disapproval. "What are you doing in there?" he would mutter. "A man doesn't belong in the kitchen. You should be outside with your brother, doing something useful." At first, I tried to ignore his comments, brushing them off as the result of his own grief. But as time went on, his criticisms became harder to endure. It wasn't just the words themselves, though they stung. It was the constant reminder that I would never be the son he wanted. My passion for cooking, which brought me so much joy and connection to my mother, was something he couldn't or wouldn't understand. Meanwhile, Jason continued to thrive. He excelled in school sports, earning accolades and admiration from coaches, peers, and most importantly, our father. Each weekend was dedicated to Jason's games, where my father would cheer from the sidelines with unrestrained enthusiasm. At family dinners, the conversation always revolved around Jason's achievements, his latest touchdown, his growing list of college scouts, and his plans for the future. For me, those dinners became unbearable. I would spend hours in the kitchen preparing meals with care and love, only for my efforts to go unnoticed. My father would barely acknowledge the food on the table, his attention focused entirely on Jason. Each dismissive comment or indifferent glance chipped away at my already fragile sense of self-worth. I tried to tell myself that his approval didn't matter, but deep down I couldn't help but long for it. One evening, I decided to try something different. I spent the entire afternoon preparing a special dinner, using one of my mother's most cherished recipes, a slow-cooked beef stew that she always made for special occasions. The smell of the stew filled the house, and for a moment I allowed myself to hope that this meal might bring us closer, even if just for one night. As we sat down to eat, I nervously watched my father's reaction, hoping for a flicker of recognition or gratitude, but he didn't even glance at the food. Instead, he immediately launched into a discussion about Jason's upcoming football game, completely ignoring the effort I had put into the meal. Jason, oblivious to the tension, chimed in with his own excitement, and the two of them were soon lost in their conversation. Something inside me snapped. "Why do you always act like I don't exist?" I blurted out, my voice shaking. The room fell silent as my father set down his fork and turned to me, his expression hard. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his tone laced with irritation. "I spend hours cooking for this family, trying to make something special, and you don't even notice," I said, the words spilling out in a rush. "All you care about is Jason and his stupid football games." My father's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought he might actually consider my words. But then he shook his head, his expression cold and unyielding. "Because you insist on wasting your time in the kitchen instead of doing something worthwhile," he shot back. "Be more like Jason. At least he's got a future." His words hit me like a physical blow. All the hurt and frustration I had bottled up came rushing to the surface. "You've never loved me, have you?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger and pain. "Not the way you loved Jason." For a moment there was silence, then to my shock he didn't deny it. "You're right," he said, his tone almost casual. "You were never the son I wanted. Jason, he's the son I can be proud of." I stared at him, stunned. The truth I had always suspected had finally been spoken aloud, and it was even more devastating than I had imagined. Without another word, I stood up and left the table, retreating to my room where I could finally let the tears fall. That night I made a decision. I would stop trying to win his love, stop chasing the approval that he would never give. Instead, I would focus on my own dreams, on the things that brought me joy and fulfillment. The kitchen, once just a refuge, became my proving ground. It was the one place where I felt in control, where I could create something meaningful and beautiful despite the chaos around me. If my father wouldn't support me, I would succeed despite him. I didn't know exactly how I would achieve my goals, but I knew one thing for certain: I would never let his lack of faith define me. Fueled by pain but driven by purpose, I took the first steps on a journey that would eventually lead me to places I could only dream of. That night, the fire inside me was lit, and it would burn brighter with each passing day. Letting go of the need for my father's approval marked a turning point in my life. It wasn't easy. Years of longing for his validation had left deep scars, but I finally realized that his opinion didn't define my worth. The decision to focus entirely on my passion for cooking wasn't just an escape, it was a declaration of independence. I poured myself into honing my skills, determined to prove to myself that the path I had chosen was not just valid, but worthy of recognition. At first, cooking at home was enough. I spent hours experimenting with recipes, watching videos of renowned chefs, and devouring cookbooks like novels. But I knew I needed more. The limitations of my kitchen became stifling, and I longed for the buzz of a professional environment. My chance came one summer, just before my senior year of high school. I stumbled upon a sign in the window of a small local restaurant: Kitchen Help Wanted. The position was for dishwashing, arguably the lowest rung in the kitchen hierarchy, but I saw it as a golden opportunity. Without telling my father, I walked in and applied for the job. The restaurant, La Petite Cuisine, was a quaint family-owned place with a modest but loyal clientele. The kitchen was small, crowded, and chaotic, but to me, it felt magical. I was hired on the spot and started the very next day. The work was grueling, scrubbing pots and pans for hours, cleaning up spills, and handling the less glamorous side of the culinary world. My hands were perpetually pruned, and I often went home reeking of dish soap and garlic. But I didn't mind. Just being in that environment, surrounded by the sounds of sizzling pans and the aroma of fresh ingredients, was exhilarating. The head chef, Chef Morales, was an intimidating figure at first glance. He had a booming voice, a sharp eye for detail, and zero tolerance for mistakes. But beneath his gruff exterior was a man who lived and breathed his craft. He noticed my curiosity early on, how I would steal glances at the cooks preparing dishes, my hands pausing mid-scrub as I watched them chop, saute, and plate with precision. One day, during a rare lull in the dinner rush, he called me over. "You dish boy," he barked, making me jump. "You've been gawking at my line cooks all week. If you're going to waste time staring, you might as well learn something." From that moment on, he began to teach me. It started with small tasks: peeling potatoes, chopping onions, assembling garnishes. Slowly, as I proved myself, he allowed me to take on more responsibilities. I learned to prepare sauces, sear meats, and plate desserts. Each task was an education, and I soaked it all in like a sponge. Chef Morales became more than a boss, he became a mentor. He pushed me hard, often barking critiques that stung, but he always followed them with advice that made me better. One evening, after I had successfully plated a batch of appetizers under his supervision, he looked at me with an approving nod. "You've got potential," he said gruffly, "but potential means nothing without hard work. Keep at it." Encouraged by his words, I began to dream bigger. The spark of ambition that had been smoldering within me ignited into a full-blown flame. When college applications opened, I took a leap of faith. I applied to several culinary programs, including the prestigious École Culinaire in France, a school I had only read about in glossy magazines and online articles. The application process was daunting, requiring essays, recommendations, and a portfolio showcasing my passion for cooking. I spent countless late nights perfecting my submissions, relying on the confidence I had gained under Chef Morales' guidance. He even wrote me a glowing letter of recommendation, calling me one of the most dedicated and promising young people he had ever mentored. When the acceptance letters arrived, I could hardly believe my eyes. Not only had I been accepted into École Culinaire, but I had also been offered spots at several other reputable culinary schools. Holding those letters in my hands felt surreal, as if the universe was finally acknowledging the validity of my dreams. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope, but hope came with a hefty price tag. École Culinaire was an extraordinary opportunity, but the tuition was astronomical. Even the other schools were far beyond what I could afford on my own. I knew I had no choice but to approach my father. Despite everything, a part of me still clung to the faint hope that he might support me this time. One evening, I gathered all the courage I could muster and presented him with the acceptance letters. My hands trembled as I laid them out on the kitchen table, explaining how hard I had worked and how much this opportunity meant to me. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a flicker of pride in his eyes, but just as quickly, it vanished. "I'm not paying for this nonsense," he said coldly, his words slicing through me like a blade. "If you want to waste your life, do it on your own dime." I tried to plead my case, pointing out the prestige of the programs and the effort I had put in to earn those acceptances. But then he revealed the real reason for his refusal, and it cut deeper than any rejection. "Jason's already struggling," he said. "I won't have you overshadowing him. His well-being comes first." I stared at him in disbelief, the weight of his words sinking in. It wasn't just that he refused to support me. It was that he actively resented the idea of me succeeding, especially if it meant outshining Jason. In that moment, any lingering hope I had for a reconciliation with my father evaporated. That night, as I packed my acceptance letters back into their envelopes, I made a vow. If my father wouldn't support me, I would find another way. I refused to let his bitterness or favoritism dictate the course of my life. My dream wasn't just about becoming a chef, it was about proving to him and to myself that I was capable of achieving something extraordinary. Failure was not an option. With renewed determination, I began brainstorming ways to fund my education. I worked extra shifts at the restaurant, saved every penny I could, and started researching scholarships and grants. I didn't know how I was going to pull it off, but one thing was certain: I would not let his lack of faith hold me back. This was my dream, and I was willing to fight for it with everything I had. Heartbroken by my father's rejection, I found myself at a crossroads, teetering between despair and determination. The acceptance letters that had once filled me with pride now felt like cruel reminders of the support I lacked. My dream of attending École culinaire seemed to be slipping through my fingers, and the weight of that possibility was suffocating. But amidst the darkness, I remembered someone who had always been a source of light in my life: my maternal aunt, Diana. Diana had always been my confidant, the one person I could turn to when the pressures of home became too much. She was my mother's older sister, a woman with a kind heart and an unshakable belief in the power of perseverance. She lived a few towns over in a modest house surrounded by a garden she tended with love. I hadn't seen her as much since my mother's passing, but I knew that if anyone could help me find clarity, it was her. When I arrived at Diana's doorstep, clutching my acceptance letters and fighting back tears, she didn't hesitate. She welcomed me in with a warm embrace, her soft voice soothing my frayed nerves. We sat at her kitchen table, the aroma of freshly brewed tea filling the air as I poured out my story. I told her everything: my passion for cooking, my struggles with my father, and my desperate desire to attend culinary school. She listened intently, her eyes filled with both sadness and determination. When I finished, Diana reached across the table and took my hands in hers. "Your mother would never forgive me if I let you give up on this," she said firmly. Her words brought tears to my eyes, but they also reignited a spark of hope. Diana wasn't wealthy, but she had a network of close friends who had known and loved my mother. Over the next few weeks, she reached out to them, sharing my story and my dream. To my amazement, they rallied behind me, pooling their resources to contribute toward my education. Their overwhelming kindness left me speechless, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like my dream was within reach. Moving in with Diana was bittersweet. Leaving my childhood home, even when filled with painful memories, felt like a final goodbye to my mother. As I packed my belongings, I couldn't help but reflect on the relationship I had always longed to have with my father. Part of me wondered if I was running away, but deep down, I knew this was the right choice. Diana's home was a haven, filled with the warmth and support I had been missing for so long. Arriving in France felt like stepping into another world. The cobblestone streets, bustling markets, and aroma of freshly baked bread were enchanting, and I couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. But as much as I marveled at my surroundings, the reality of culinary school hit me like a freight train. École culinaire was everything I had dreamed of and more. The instructors were exacting, the curriculum rigorous, and the standards impossibly high. Every day was a test of my skills, stamina, and determination. Mornings began with early lectures on the science of cooking, where we delved into the chemistry of flavors and textures. Afternoons were spent in the kitchen, where we honed our techniques under the watchful eyes of our instructors. The evenings were a blur of study sessions and practice runs, my hands often blistered from hours of chopping, whisking, and kneading. There were moments when I felt utterly overwhelmed, questioning whether I was truly cut out for this path. But in those moments of doubt, I thought of my mother. I carried one of her old recipe cards in my pocket, a faded sheet with her handwritten instructions for apple tart. Reading her words reminded me of why I had started this journey and gave me the strength to keep going. To ease the financial burden on Diana and her friends, I took on part-time jobs at local bistros and cafes. The work was physically exhausting, often requiring me to juggle long shifts with the demands of school. But it was also invaluable. Working in real kitchens exposed me to the pace and pressure of the industry, teaching me lessons that couldn't be learned in a classroom. I learned to navigate the organized chaos of a dinner rush, to improvise when things didn't go according to plan, and to work as part of a team. Each shift sharpened my skills and deepened my passion for the art of cooking. France itself became a source of inspiration. The local markets were a feast for the senses, with vibrant displays of fresh produce, fragrant herbs, and artisanal cheeses. I would spend my weekends wandering through them, absorbing the culture and experimenting with new ingredients. The French approach to food was one of reverence and artistry, and it resonated deeply with me. I began to see cooking not just as a skill, but as a way of telling a story, of connecting with people on a profound level. Despite the hardships, I thrived at École culinaire. My instructors noticed my dedication and raw talent, often offering guidance and mentorship. One chef in particular, Chef Laurent, took me under his wing. He was a perfectionist with a sharp tongue, but he recognized my potential and pushed me to reach new heights. Under his tutelage, I mastered sauces, baked delicate pastries, and learned the art of plating dishes with precision. Each challenge I overcame and every dish I perfected was a testament to my resilience. As the months turned into years, I began to feel a sense of belonging I had never experienced before. My classmates became like family, bonded by shared struggles and triumphs. We celebrated each other's successes and supported one another through failures. For the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Through it all, I remained grounded by my commitment to Diana and her friends. Their sacrifices and unwavering support were never far from my mind, and I made it a point to write to them regularly, updating them on my progress and expressing my gratitude. Diana's responses were always filled with pride and encouragement, her belief in me a constant source of strength. By the time I reached my final year at École Culinaire, I had transformed in ways I never thought possible. The shy, uncertain boy who had first set foot in the kitchen had grown into a confident and capable chef ready to take on the world. My journey was far from over, but I knew that with my mother's memory driving me and Diana's unwavering support, there was nothing I couldn't achieve. My years of relentless effort at École Culinaire culminated in a moment I'll carry with me forever. Graduation day was a blur of emotions, a mixture of pride, relief, and disbelief. As I stood among the top students in my class, receiving accolades from my instructors and peers, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. The shy, uncertain boy who had first stepped into a kitchen now stood as a confident young chef, armed with knowledge, skill, and a burning desire to make his mark. Recognition felt surreal, especially considering the dismissiveness I had faced back home. For once, I wasn't just fighting to prove myself, I had done it, but the moment wasn't mine alone. My success was built on the sacrifices of others, particularly my Aunt Diana and her circle of friends. Their generosity and belief in me had made everything possible. As I walked across the stage to receive my certificate, I thought of them and my mother, silently thanking them for their love and support. Pride swelled in my chest, not just for myself, but for the community of people who had lifted me up when I needed it most. Graduation opened doors I had only dreamed of. Among the many opportunities that presented themselves was a coveted position at La Maison Étoilée, one of Paris's most prestigious restaurants. The establishment was a beacon of culinary excellence, known for its exquisite dishes and rigorous standards. When the offer came, I accepted without hesitation, knowing it was my chance to refine my craft in one of the toughest kitchens in the world. La Maison Étoilée was as intimidating as it was inspiring. The moment I stepped into its gleaming kitchen, I was struck by the sheer intensity of the environment. Every dish was scrutinized for perfection, every ingredient carefully sourced and prepared with precision. The chefs moved with clockwork efficiency, their movements fluid and deliberate. Mistakes weren't tolerated and the pressure to perform was immense. Yet under that pressure, I thrived. Working alongside some of the best chefs in the industry was both humbling and exhilarating. I learned more in my first few months there than I had in years of school. The head chef, a stern but brilliant woman named Chef Beaulieu, was a master of her craft and an uncompromising perfectionist. She pushed me harder than anyone ever had, her sharp critiques cutting but always constructive. Under her guidance, I began to see cooking in a new light, not just as a skill but as an art form. I learned how to elevate classic dishes, transforming them into something extraordinary with the right balance of technique, creativity, and passion. The hours were grueling. Most nights, I didn't leave the kitchen until well past midnight, my body aching and my mind racing with thoughts of the next day's challenges. But I loved every second of it. Each service was a test of my limits, and each success felt like a triumph. The camaraderie among the staff kept me going, the shared sense of purpose binding us together even in the most stressful moments. Despite the demands of my job, I remained deeply connected to Diana. Every month, I sent her a portion of my earnings, determined to ease the financial burden she had taken on to support my dreams. It wasn't just about money, it was my way of saying thank you, of showing her that her sacrifices hadn't been in vain. Her letters of encouragement became my lifeline, filled with updates about life back home and expressions of pride in my accomplishments. "Your mother would be so proud of you," she often wrote, and those words never failed to bring tears to my eyes. Success at La Maison Étoilée was a personal victory, but it also planted the seed of a larger dream. Paris, with its vibrant culinary scene, had shown me the limitless possibilities of food as an expression of culture, emotion, and memory. I began to imagine a restaurant of my own, a place where every dish told a story, my story. I wanted to honor my mother's memory, to create a space where her values of love, resilience, and creativity could live on. The idea consumed me, and I started to see it as the ultimate culmination of everything I had worked for. To make that dream a reality, I adopted a frugal lifestyle. I saved every euro I could, avoiding unnecessary expenses and channeling everything into my future. My colleagues teased me for my thriftiness, but I didn't care. On my rare days off, I sketched out plans for the restaurant, filling notebooks with ideas for menus, decor, and branding. I wanted every detail to reflect my journey, from the name to the atmosphere to the food itself. It was an ambitious vision, but I was no stranger to hard work. As time passed, I realized that to bring my dream to life, I would need to return to my roots. Paris had become a second home to me, but my heart remained tied to the place where my journey had begun. There was something poetic about returning to my hometown, about building something meaningful in the very place where I had faced so much rejection and doubt. By the time I decided to leave France, I had built a solid foundation as a chef and saved enough to take the first steps toward my goal. Leaving Paris was bittersweet. The city had given me so much knowledge, experience, and a sense of belonging I had never known before. But it was time to move on, to take everything I had learned and apply it to the next chapter of my life. My colleagues at La Maison Étoilée threw me a small farewell party, complete with heartfelt toasts and promises to visit once my restaurant was open. Chef Beaulieu, in her typical no-nonsense way, handed me a bottle of vintage wine and said, "Use this to celebrate your first Michelin star." As I boarded the plane back to my hometown, a mix of emotions washed over me. I felt excitement and apprehension in equal measure, the weight of my ambitions pressing heavily on my shoulders. But more than anything, I felt ready. The years of struggle, sacrifice, and growth had prepared me for this moment. With experience, determination, and a clear vision, I was ready to transform my dream into a reality, one plate at a time. Returning to my hometown after years away felt surreal, like stepping into a memory that had been waiting for me to return. The streets I had walked as a boy were still the same, lined with modest houses, small businesses, and familiar faces that now looked older, but everything felt different. I was no longer the boy who had once been dismissed and ridiculed. I had returned as a man with a vision, fueled by years of struggle, growth, and determination. This time I was here on my terms, with a mission to honor the one person who had always believed in me, my mother, Elizabeth. My return wasn't solitary. Alongside me were Adrian and Camille, my closest friends from culinary school and now my business partners. We had forged an unbreakable bond over years of long nights in the kitchen and shared dreams of building something extraordinary. When I shared my vision with them, they didn't hesitate to join me. Together, we pooled our resources, combining their expertise in operations and marketing with my culinary skills to bring the dream to life. The first step was finding the perfect location. After weeks of searching, we settled on a charming building nestled in a quiet but accessible corner of the city. Its rustic charm and spacious interior were exactly what I had envisioned for the restaurant. The hard work began immediately. Every detail, from the design of the decor to the layout of the kitchen, required careful thought. I wanted Elizabeth's table to be more than a restaurant. I wanted it to feel like stepping into my mother's embrace, a place where love and warmth were as essential as the food itself. The decor was rustic yet elegant, inspired by the simplicity and beauty of my mother's kitchen. Wooden beams, soft lighting, and walls adorned with family photos and handwritten recipes created an atmosphere that felt both personal and inviting. The centerpiece of the restaurant was a large, open kitchen where diners could watch the food being prepared, a nod to the transparency and connection that defined my approach to cooking. The menu was my pride and joy. Each dish was inspired by my mother's recipes, lovingly reimagined with a modern twist. Her creamy pasta became a delicate fettuccine infused with truffle oil. Her hearty stews transformed into elegantly plated braises with seasonal vegetables. And of course, her signature apple tart remained, served just as she had made it, with a dollop of fresh cream and a sprinkle of cinnamon. Every dish told a story, weaving together my memories, my journey, and my gratitude. Adrian and Camille were instrumental in making it all come together. While I focused on the food, they handled operations, logistics, and marketing. Adrian, with his sharp eye for detail, ensured that every element of the restaurant ran smoothly, from staff training to supplier negotiations. Camille, with her flair for design and storytelling, created a marketing campaign that captured the essence of Elizabeth's table. Together, we formed a team that complemented each other's strengths, united by a shared vision. After months of preparation, the big day arrived, the soft opening. We decided to host a private celebration for close friends, family, and those who had supported me along the way. Invitations were sent to a select few, including Diana and her friends, whose generosity had made my journey possible. I wanted this evening to be a tribute to them, a moment to express my gratitude and share what we had built together. As the sun set on the evening of the launch, the restaurant came alive with a warm, golden glow. The tables were set with care, each adorned with fresh flowers and handwritten cards thanking our guests for their support. The air was filled with the rich aroma of the dishes I had spent weeks perfecting, creamy soups, artfully plated in trays, and desserts that seemed almost too beautiful to eat. Guests began to arrive, their faces lighting up as they stepped inside. Diana was among the first, her smile radiant as she took in the space. "It's beautiful," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "Your mother would be so proud." Her words brought a lump to my throat, but they also filled me with a profound sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just a restaurant, it was a testament to love, resilience, and the power of dreams. The evening unfolded like a dream. Guests mingled, savoring the food and sharing stories. I moved through the room, personally thanking each person for their role in my journey. Diana beamed with pride, surrounded by her friends who had helped make my education possible. Adrian and Camille worked seamlessly behind the scenes, ensuring everything went off without a hitch. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. Toward the end of the evening, I stood to address the room. The soft murmur of conversation quieted as I raised my glass. "This restaurant," I began, my voice steady but filled with emotion, "is more than just a place to eat. It's a tribute to the woman who taught me that love and hard work can transform anything. My mother, Elizabeth, was the heart of our family, and everything you see here is because of her." I paused, looking around at the faces of those who had believed in me when others hadn't. "I want to thank each of you for being here tonight. Your support, your encouragement, it means more to me than I can put into words. Elizabeth's table is her legacy, but it's also ours. It's a reminder that even in the face of adversity, we can rise and create something beautiful." The room erupted into applause, and I was overcome with emotion. Diana pulled me into a hug, whispering, "You did it." And for the first time in a long while, I truly felt that I had. As the evening came to close, I stood by the door, bidding farewell to the guests as they left. The glow of their smiles and their kind words lingered in the air, filling the restaurant with a palpable sense of warmth and possibility. When the last guest had gone, I sat at one of the tables, looking around at the space we had created. The journey had been anything but easy, but in that moment it all felt worth it. Elizabeth's table was more than a dream realized, it was a promise kept. It was my way of honoring my mother's memory and proving to myself that I was capable of creating something meaningful. As I sat there, the soft hum of the night settling around me, I knew that this was only the beginning. My journey was far from over, but for the first time, I felt ready to embrace whatever came next. This was my story, and I was finally telling it on my own terms. The evening of Elizabeth's table's soft opening had been everything I had dreamed of, a celebration of hard work, resilience, and the memory of my mother. The room was alive with the sound of laughter and the clinking of glasses, a testament to the love and support of those who had stood by me. I moved between the guests, sharing my gratitude and basking in the success of the launch. But as I approached a table near the entrance, the atmosphere shifted, sending a ripple of unease through me. I turned and froze. Standing by the door as though they had materialized from the shadows were two faces I hadn't seen in years, my father, Robert, and my brother, Jason. Their presence sent a chill through me, a reminder of wounds I had worked hard to heal. My stomach tightened as I forced myself to remain composed. They had no place here, not after the years of silence and rejection, but there they stood, uninvited, as if the past between us didn't exist. Robert was the first to step forward, a large object wrapped in cloth cradled in his arms. Jason followed closely, his sheepish smile betraying discomfort or guilt perhaps. "Nathan," Robert said, his tone uncharacteristically warm, "we heard about your big night and thought we'd surprise you." He paused dramatically before pulling back the cloth to reveal a beautifully painted portrait of my mother. The sight of her likeness hit me like a punch to the chest. The painting was stunning, capturing her warmth and grace in a way that made it feel almost alive. For a fleeting moment, I felt gratitude, but it was quickly overshadowed by suspicion. I knew my father and brother well enough to sense there was more to this gesture than met the eye. Feigning composure, I nodded. "It's thoughtful," I said, choosing my words carefully. "I didn't expect to see you here." Robert's smile widened, his voice adopting a tone of practiced sincerity. "We're family, Nathan. We've always believed in you. Seeing you succeed like this, it's all we've ever wanted." Jason chimed in, his tone overly enthusiastic. "Yeah, we're so proud of you, big brother." Their words rang hollow, like actors reciting lines from a poorly written script. The tightness in my chest grew, but I bit my tongue. This was neither the time nor the place to confront them. My guests were still enjoying the evening, and I refused to let their sudden appearance overshadow the success of the night. Instead, I took the painting and thanked them tersely, placing it in a corner where it wouldn't attract much attention. As the evening progressed, I made an effort to avoid Robert and Jason, focusing instead on my guests. But their presence lingered, a shadow I couldn't ignore. It wasn't long before I overheard Jason boasting to a group of diners near the bar. He was animated, his voice carrying above the hum of conversation. "Yeah, I'll be helping Nathan out with the business," he said, grinning. "He's got the food side handled, but he's gonna need me for the management stuff." My suspicions were confirmed. They weren't here to celebrate me, they were here to stake a claim in my success. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, but I forced myself to remain calm. This night wasn't about them. It was about my mother, about Diana, about the people who had believed in me when no one else did. I wouldn't let Robert and Jason tarnish it with their selfish motives. Still, I knew I couldn't ignore the situation forever. As the evening drew to close and the last of the guests began to leave, I found Robert and Jason lingering near the entrance. Their smiles were plastered on, their postures relaxed as though they had every right to be there. I approached them, my face carefully neutral. "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice even. "But we should talk." Robert raised an eyebrow, his smile faltering slightly. "Of course," he said, his tone overly accommodating. Jason nodded eagerly, clearly oblivious to the tension simmering between us. I led them to a quiet corner of the restaurant, away from the remaining guests and staff. Once we were seated, I didn't waste any time. "Why are you really here?" I asked, my gaze fixed on my father. Robert's expression hardened for a moment before he recovered, leaning back in his chair. "We're here because we're proud of you, Nathan," he said, his voice measured. "We wanted to support you on this important night." Jason, less adept at hiding his intentions, chimed in. "And we figured now that you've made it, maybe we could help out. Family business, right?" I couldn't stop the bitter laugh that escaped me. "Family business," I repeated, shaking my head. "Where was this support when I needed it? When I came to you with my dream and you told me it was a waste of time, when I begged for help and you turned me away?" Robert's jaw tightened, his mask of civility slipping. "That was a long time ago," he said sharply. "Things are different now." "Different?" I snapped, my voice rising. "The only thing that's different is that I succeeded without you, and now you want to swoop in and take credit for it, to claim a piece of something you had no part in building." Jason shifted uncomfortably, his earlier bravado fading. "We're just trying to make things right," he mumbled. I leaned forward, my voice cold. "If you wanted to make things right, you would have been there when it mattered. You can't rewrite history just because it's convenient for you now." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Robert's face was a storm of conflicting emotions, anger, embarrassment, and perhaps a trace of regret, but whatever remorse he felt wasn't enough to soften his pride. "We're your family," he said finally, his tone hard. "We deserve a place here." I stood, my decision made. "You're right, you are my family, but that doesn't mean you're entitled to anything. Elizabeth's table isn't just a restaurant, it's a legacy, my mother's legacy, and I won't let you tarnish it." With that, I walked away, leaving them to sit in the heavy silence of their own making. As I rejoined my team and thanked the last of the guests, I felt a sense of closure. Their sudden appearance had threatened to unravel the evening, but I hadn't let it. This was my story, my success, and no one, not even Robert and Jason, could take it away from me. As the evening reached its peak, the warm hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses filled Elizabeth's table with an undeniable energy. The room glowed under soft, golden lighting, and the air carried the aroma of the dishes we had served throughout the night. It was the perfect moment for us, the team behind this dream, to address the people who had come to celebrate with us. Adrian was the first to speak. He stood at the front of the room, holding a glass of champagne, his natural charisma shining through. With his signature blend of humor and sincerity, he thanked everyone for their support and spoke about the hard work that had gone into bringing Elizabeth's table to life. "We started with an idea," he said, his French accent adding a certain charm. "But an idea means nothing without dedication and passion. That's what Nathan brought to this project: heart, soul, and vision. Without him, we wouldn't be standing here tonight." The guests erupted into applause, and I felt a wave of gratitude for Adrian's kind words. Next, Camille took the stage. Ever the eloquent storyteller, she painted a picture of our journey, from late-night brainstorming sessions to the countless obstacles we had overcome. "This restaurant isn't just a place to eat," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "It's a labor of love. It's a testament to resilience, creativity, and the memory of a remarkable woman, Elizabeth, whose spirit is infused into every corner of this space." When Camille finished, the applause was even louder, and I knew it was my turn. As the applause died down, all eyes turned to me. I stood, champagne glass in hand, my heart racing. I had rehearsed this moment in my head countless times, but the reality of it felt different. My palms were damp and my chest felt tight, but I steadied myself. This was my moment to speak, not just as the owner of Elizabeth's table, but as the son of the woman whose name graced its door. "Thank you, Adrian and Camille, for those beautiful words," I began, my voice steady but charged with emotion. "And thank you all for being here tonight. This evening isn't just about celebrating the opening of Elizabeth's table. It's about honoring the memory of my mother, Elizabeth, who believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself." The room erupted into warm applause, and I paused, taking a deep breath. The faces before me were kind and encouraging, friends, supporters, and even strangers who had come to share in this moment. But among them were two faces I couldn't ignore: my father, Robert, and my brother, Jason. They sat near the back, their expressions carefully neutral. I knew what I was about to say would change the tone of the evening, but it needed to be said. "This journey," I continued, my voice firm, "wasn't without its challenges. There were moments when it felt like the world was against me, when the people who should have stood by me didn't. My father, Robert, and my brother, Jason, are here tonight, and while I'm grateful they've come, I think it's important to acknowledge the truth." The room grew quieter, murmurs spreading as the guests exchanged puzzled glances. I noticed Robert shifting uncomfortably in his seat, his forced smile slipping. Jason glanced at him nervously, his hand tightening around his glass. "For those who don't know," I said, letting my gaze sweep across the room, "when I was accepted into culinary school, my father refused to help fund my education. He told me my dream wasn't worth supporting. Instead, he prioritized my brother's well-being over mine, leaving me to find my own way. That's why I had to turn to my Aunt Diana and her amazing friends, people who believed in me when my own family didn't." Silence in the room was deafening. I could feel the weight of my words sinking in, the truth hanging in the air like a heavy curtain. I glanced at Diana, who sat with her friends near the front. Her face was calm, her expression one of quiet pride. Then my eyes shifted to Robert and Jason. Robert's face was flushed, his jaw clenched, while Jason stared down at the table, avoiding eye contact. "I carried that resentment for a long time," I continued, my voice softening. "And it wasn't easy to. But standing here tonight, I've realized something. Their lack of support taught me to be strong. It taught me to fight for myself, to believe in my dreams, and to succeed despite the odds." I paused, letting the moment linger. The room was utterly still, every face turned toward me, waiting for what I would say next. Then I delivered the twist, and because family is important to me, I've decided to extend an olive branch. I turned my gaze to Jason, who looked up in surprise. "Jason, I'd like to offer you a position here behind the bar, as a bartender." The room erupted into whispers and scattered applause. Guests, unaware of the tension behind the scenes, interpreted the offer as a gesture of reconciliation. Jason's face turned beet red, his expression a mix of embarrassment and disbelief. Robert's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening further, but he said nothing. Jason forced a tight smile, nodding as if he were grateful. I raised my glass to conclude, letting my gaze return to the crowd. "To new beginnings," I said, my voice steady once more, "and to honoring those who shaped us, for better or worse. Thank you all for being here tonight." The guests raised their glasses, echoing the toast. The moment felt both cathartic and surreal, a blend of closure and defiance. I had taken control of the narrative, exposed the truth, and maintained my dignity. As the crowd returned to their conversations, I noticed Diana watching me with a knowing smile. She nodded, her silent approval speaking volumes. The rest of the evening passed without incident, though Robert and Jason left shortly afterward, their forced smiles barely masking their humiliation. I didn't stop them, nor did I dwell on their departure. The night belonged to me, to the team who had built Elizabeth's table, to the guests who had supported us, and most of all, to my mother's enduring legacy. When the last guest had gone, I stood in the quiet, empty restaurant, the weight of the evening settling over me. I had done what I came here to do: celebrate a dream realized, honor my mother's memory, and reclaim my story. And in that moment, I felt truly at peace. The warm glow of Elizabeth's table spilled into the quiet street as the last of the guests departed, their smiles and kind words lingering in the air. I stood by the door, shaking hands and offering genuine thanks to everyone who had come to support us. The evening had been a triumph, a culmination of years of hard work and resilience. But as the crowd thinned, my gaze caught two figures standing in the shadows near the corner of the building: my father, Robert, and my brother, Jason. Their faces were unmistakable, etched with fury that simmered just beneath the surface. Robert's shoulders were squared, his posture rigid, while Jason fidgeted, his eyes darting between me and the pavement. The sight of them drained the lingering warmth from the evening, replacing it with a chill of tension. I sighed, knowing the confrontation I had hoped to avoid was now inevitable. Robert was the first to approach, his movements deliberate and his expression tight. "Nathan," he began sharply, his voice low but venomous. "What the hell was that in there?" I didn't need to ask what he meant. Jason quickly interjected, his voice cracking with a mix of anger and embarrassment. "You humiliated me in front of everyone." His fists were clenched at his sides and his face was flushed. "You knew what we wanted and you turned it into some kind of joke. Why would you do that?" I crossed my arms, refusing to be intimidated. My tone was calm but firm as I responded. "Humiliate you? I offered you a job, Jason, a real opportunity, more than you ever offered me when I needed help. You should be thanking me." Jason's frustration boiled over. He stepped closer, his voice rising. "You made me look like a fool, a bartender. Really, you know that's not what we came here for." "And what exactly did you come here for?" I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "To ride on my success. To take credit for something you had no part in building. Don't act like this is about family, Jason. It's about your entitlement." Robert stepped in then, his voice dangerously low, dripping with barely contained anger. "You're out of line, Nathan," he said, his eyes narrowing. "We're your family. You owe us." "Oh, you." I cut him off, my voice rising as years of pent-up frustration surged to the surface. "I owe you nothing, Robert. Where were you when I needed support? When I came to you with my dream, you slammed the door in my face. You told me I wasn't worth it, that my dream wasn't worth it. You prioritized Jason just like you always have and left me to figure it out on my own. And now you think you can just show up and demand a piece of this. This isn't about family. It's about you not being able to stand the fact that I succeeded without you." Jason's face crumpled, and for a moment he looked like the younger brother I had tried to protect so many years ago. His voice broke as he pleaded, "We just wanted to be part of this. Why couldn't you have given us that?" Something softened in me, but only slightly. I met his gaze, my tone steady but unyielding. "Because you didn't earn it, Jason. You don't get to show up now after years of ignoring me and expect a free ride. That's not how this works. I built this and I'm proud of it. But I did it without you, and that's the way it's going to stay." Jason stepped back, his face a mix of shame and anger. Robert, however, was far from finished, his face twisted in rage, his voice rising as he tried to regain control. "You'll regret this, Nathan," he hissed. "You think you're untouchable now, but you're not. Don't forget where you came from." I held his gaze, my voice cold and unwavering. "I've heard that before," I said, "and yet here I am. Let me make one thing clear, Robert. Stay away from my business or I'll make sure the law does." Robert's jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides. For a moment I thought he might lash out physically, but instead he yanked Jason by the arm and turned away. "Come on," he muttered, his tone bitter. Jason hesitated, glancing back at me one last time, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and resentment before following. The door slammed behind them and the quiet of the night enveloped me once more. I stood there for a moment, my chest heaving, adrenaline coursing through me. The confrontation had been unpleasant, but as the silence settled, so did a sense of clarity. I had stood my ground. I hadn't let them manipulate or guilt me into giving away what I had worked so hard to build. This was my success, my dream, and I had every right to protect it. As I turned back toward the restaurant, I saw Adrian and Camille standing near the bar, their faces filled with quiet concern. "You okay?" Camille asked softly as I approached. I nodded, forcing a small smile. "I am now," I said, and I meant it. For years I had carried the weight of my father's rejection and my brother's complicity, but tonight I had finally let go. I had faced them, spoken my truth, and refused to let their bitterness taint what I had achieved. As I locked up the restaurant for the night, the lingering energy of the confrontation faded, replaced by a deep sense of peace. The evening had been a celebration of resilience, of love, and of the memory of my mother. It was a reminder that no matter how far I had come, I still had more to give, more to build, and more to honor. And for the first time in a long while, I felt free. The morning after the confrontation with Robert and Jason, I stepped into Elizabeth's table with a renewed sense of determination. The restaurant had survived its first major test, a soft opening full of high expectations, critical eyes, and unexpected drama. Despite the tension, it had been a resounding success. The positive feedback from our guests, the warm words of encouragement, and the steady flow of reservations already pouring in were proof that the vision we had poured our hearts into was resonating with people. The restaurant thrived in the days and weeks that followed. Word spread quickly, and soon Elizabeth's table was the talk of the town. Locals were drawn to the warmth of the space, the carefully curated menu, and the story behind it all. It didn't take long for food critics to take notice, and glowing reviews began appearing in newspapers and online. Each article celebrated not only the dishes but the narrative of resilience and love that had inspired the restaurant. Adrian, Camille, and I worked tirelessly to keep up with the growing demand. Adrian's meticulous planning ensured that our operations ran like clockwork, while Camille's marketing strategies brought in a steady stream of new customers. I poured myself into the kitchen, constantly refining our menu and experimenting with new dishes that would keep our offerings fresh and exciting. The three of us made an exceptional team, united by a shared vision and a deep respect for one another's talents. Amid the success, there were whispers of trouble brewing. Jason, still reeling from his public embarrassment, began spreading rumors about me and the restaurant. At first, it was small things, snide remarks to mutual acquaintances or passive-aggressive comments on social media. But over time, his bitterness grew more overt. He hinted that I had stolen recipes, implied that I was cutting corners in the kitchen, and even suggested that the restaurant's success was built on lies. Robert, true to form, supported Jason's attempts to discredit me. He made vague threats about legal action, claiming a stake in Elizabeth's table based on their contribution of the portrait. Though their efforts were annoying, they ultimately amounted to little more than background noise. The restaurant's reputation remained untarnished, bolstered by the loyalty of our customers and the undeniable quality of our food. I refused to let their antics distract me. Instead, I focused on what truly mattered, the people who had believed in me and helped me get to where I was. Diana visited the restaurant often, her pride in me evident with every smile and hug. She loved to sit near the portrait of my mother, gazing at it with a wistful expression. "Your mother would be so proud of you," she said one afternoon as we sat together after the lunch rush. "You've built something beautiful, Nathan, something lasting." Her words filled me with a deep sense of fulfillment. The portrait Robert and Jason had brought to the launch party now hung prominently near the entrance, not as a symbol of their involvement but as a tribute to my mother's enduring presence. Every time I passed it, I felt her encouragement, her belief in me, and her love. It reminded me of why I had started this journey and gave me the strength to keep moving forward. As the restaurant continued to flourish, Adrian, Camille, and I began discussing the possibility of expansion. The idea of opening a second location was both thrilling and daunting. We spent hours brainstorming potential cities, weighing the pros and cons of each option. Adrian, ever the strategist, compiled detailed reports on market trends and demographics, while Camille sketched out concepts for the branding and design. For my part, I dreamed of new menus and ways to bring the spirit of Elizabeth's table to a broader audience. The prospect of expansion wasn't just about growing the business, it was about sharing our story. Elizabeth's table had become more than a restaurant. It had become a symbol of resilience, love, and the power of forging your own path. Customers often shared their own stories with us, telling us how the restaurant had inspired them to pursue their dreams or reconnect with loved ones. Those moments were more rewarding than any review or accolade, a reminder that food had the power to bring people together and create meaningful connections. Despite the success, I remained grounded. I knew how quickly fortunes could change in the restaurant industry, and I was determined to protect what we had built. Every decision was made carefully with an eye toward sustainability and long-term growth. I lived modestly, investing the majority of my earnings back into the business. Adrian and Camille shared my commitment, and together we navigated the challenges of running a thriving restaurant with unwavering focus. Eventually, the noise from Robert and Jason faded into the background. Their threats never materialized, likely because they realized the futility of their claims. I no longer spared them much thought. My energy was better spent on the people who mattered, the ones who had stood by me and helped me build a life I could be proud of. Diana, Adrian, Camille, and the incredible team we had assembled at Elizabeth's table were my family now, bound together by love, loyalty, and shared purpose. One busy evening, as I stood in the bustling kitchen overseeing my team, I took a moment to step back and observe. The sounds of sizzling pans, the rhythmic chopping of knives, and the hum of conversation from the dining room created a symphony that filled me with pride. My staff moved with precision and passion, each person contributing their unique talents to the success of the restaurant. I couldn't help but smile. The journey that had brought me here had been anything but easy. It was a path filled with heartbreak, rejection, and countless obstacles, but it was also a journey of growth, resilience, and self-discovery. Every challenge I had faced, every failure I had endured, had led me to this moment. I had built something meaningful, something that honored my mother's legacy and allowed me to thrive on my own terms. As I stood there watching my dream come to life, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the people who had believed in me, for the lessons I had learned, and for the strength that had carried me through even the darkest days. Elizabeth's table wasn't just a restaurant, it was a testament to the power of love, perseverance, and the human spirit. For me, that was the greatest victory of all.